Mazda has updated its CX-60 SUV for 2025. Now, the changes are subtle. In fact, most of the changes are under the skin. But Mazda realizes these days you've got to stay on top of your game. So rather than waiting for a big facelift to come along a few years down the line, it's now adding something new each year. And Mazda's CX-60 really needs to be positioned against some of the more premium players. I'm talking the Audi Q5, BMW X3, and actually another slight outlier in that section, Lexus as well with the NX. Now, the design, it hasn't changed, but I think it's worth mentioning because Mazda's design language in general is actually pretty good at the moment. So it does have a very vertical kind of bluff front end on it. I do like this bit of bright work, and also how the indicator runs through there and into what are actually quite small headlights. It is overall a design that, you know, it's not very dated, it's not very polarizing, it just looks good. There's details like this little detail on the side with the PHEV on the wing. Obviously, if you go for the diesel option, it says straight six on it because Mazda is amazingly a manufacturer that still offers a big straight six diesel engine in this. But around the side, really there's not a great deal of difference when you go between the different specification grades. So, you know, you've got nice alloy wheel designs, you've got very simple surfacing down the side here, which really gives it a real sense of balance. It's very much a 1 2/3 ratio here, so it does look good. Belt line is high, but actually when you're sitting in, and I'll show you in a moment, it doesn't feel all that high. Now, this is obviously the CX-60. There is a CX-80, and you'll find details of that on our channel and on Complete Car as well. So if you do need to have a third row of seats, well, the CX-80 will cover that for you. Powertrains wise, they're pretty much about the same though. So you've got a plug-in hybrid in Ireland available, which is what we're driving today, and there's also a diesel option too. Around the back, again, no design changes, but it is quite an attractive looking machine from the back. Inside, plenty of boot space, a nice even load level here. It's not especially deep as well, so getting in and out is quite simple for bulky items. There's a little bit of extra storage underneath. You don't get a full-size spare wheel, but having that space is kind of handy. Then as well, you've got other little features. You've got a 1500 watt AC charge port on that side. You've got more power outlets here. You've got these handy little latches for dropping down the rear seat. So if you do need more luggage space or more cargo space, you can drop down the rear seats. They have a 40-20-40 split in the back. So overall, you know, it's quite a practical car in terms of, for a family perspective, you'll get a lot into the boot. There's still actually pretty good amount of space inside. So let's show you what that's like now. In the back, there's pretty decent amount of space. It's not the biggest in its category, but nor is it the smallest. For reference, I'm of average height, I'm 5'9", and I've got a good amount of headroom. I've got an inch or two to spare. I'm okay in terms of knee room here as well. This driving seat is set for my normal driving position, so I'm effectively sitting behind myself, and yeah, do you know what? I'm actually quite comfortable here. Seats are nice and supportive, and they do come up far enough here to give you a little bit of leg support underneath, and I can also get my feet in underneath the seat in front as well, so that's a benefit as well. In terms of practicalities, well, you've got pockets in the backs of both front seats. There's a decent sized door bin. You'll get a big enough drinks bottle in there as well. You've got heated outer rear seats in this particular car, and also ISOFIX points in both of these outer rear seats. You've got 2 USB-C ports here. You've also got a 220 volt socket as well, so that's quite useful. Middle seat, as ever, you know, you're kind of getting the short straw if you are in the middle seat. It sits up a lot higher, it's a bit firmer, and it's just not as wide in general. Plus there is a slight transmission hump. It's not as pronounced as what we see in some other vehicles, but it is still there, so you are going to struggle with your feet positioning if you're sitting in the middle seat. Now, of course, if you're not going to sit there, you can also pull out this center armrest, and you've got a couple of cup holders in there as well, as usual. But overall, you know, visibility is good. Windows not particularly high. You've got a nice split sunroof here as well, so there's a good amount of light coming in. And the front seats are actually quite wide apart, so you still have a pretty good field of vision in front as well. So overall, okay, it would be nice if it was maybe a little bit roomier, but generally this is a pretty comfortable space for 2 adults. 3 people will get in here, a little bit more of a squeeze, but overall, no complaints. Up front, well, this is really where you see how Mazda has upped its game in terms of design and quality. It does feel very premium. It looks very premium in here, and they've done it in a very tasteful way as well. So first of all, driving position, there's electrically adjustable seats, a huge amount of adjustments, so very easy to get into a comfortable position. The seat itself has a nice bit of support underneath your legs, as well as a side bolster, but it's not overly bolstered in that respect. This particular car is also equipped with a electrically adjustable steering wheel, so you can go for reach and rake. There's generally quite a broad range of movement there. So again, getting driving position is very easy. Mazda does actually have a very clever automated function as well. You can actually go into the car's menu system, input your actual height, and it will then, you hit go, and it will actually configure everything, even the door mirrors, to have it exactly how generally it should be. Obviously you can tweak it a little bit, but it's a very neat feature to have that. You can also program multiple people as well, so if you're sharing the car with a partner or a friend or whatever, you can also have that profile set up, so as soon as you get in, it will adjust everything to you instantly, which is a really handy thing to have. Now, in terms of the layout, you've got a fully digital instrument display in front of you. It's nicely done. It's not overly stylized with graphics. Everything's very clear, very easy to read. You know, all the gradations are just very clean design. So Mazda's done a good job there. You've got a head-up color display as well. Again, very comprehensive, gives you all the right information. Mazda's infotainment system is very simply laid out. It's not multiple deep in terms of menus and things like that. Obviously using the rotary controller here, it's very reminiscent of BMW's iDrive system. It works really well, nice and intuitive to use, very easy to navigate while you're driving. Even if you have to do that, it's very simple to learn how the whole system works. Obviously you've still got stuff like Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so if you do want to have your smartphone mirrored there, it's very easy to do that too. So all that works quite well. In terms of the center console then, you've still got a physical drive selector here. You've got a wireless phone charger. You do have some USB-C ports underneath here as well. A little bit of a storage area. Not the deepest, if I'm honest. You will get a small drinks bottle in there, but it's not as deep as what you see in some other manufacturers. You do get a couple of cup holders here. You can close that over. Another thing I really have to give Mazda credit for is using physical controls for all of the climate system as well. Not only do you have a row of buttons here for your heated steering wheel, heated and ventilated seats and all that stuff, but actually sticking out, you've got these kind of almost piano keys for adjusting the temperature. Makes it very easy to do without ever looking at it. It's a nice design, very nicely done, well executed. So hat tip to Mazda for doing that. But we've also got to talk about the overall design. There's a lot of this kind of real craftsmanship has gone into this. You know, this detailed Japanese inspired stitching across the dashboard fascia, the bright work in here, and just how the whole thing comes together. It's very tastefully done, and it's when you sit in and look at it that you see this is where Mazda is going now. This is how it needs to be compared to the traditional premium brands. In fact, in many ways, it's surpassing what they're offering. Just the material quality, it is first rate, and that's the one thing you should really look at when you go and sit into this first of all, and just take it in, because Mazda's really done a solid job here. In a lot of instances, you're probably going to start your journey in a CX-60 plug-in hybrid by unplugging and setting off, in which case you'll have probably a partial or fully charged battery, and it will default to using its EV mode when doing so. And to be fair, it does feel pretty much like an electric vehicle in that sense. The motor isn't the most powerful in the world, but it's enough to pull the CX-60 along without any real strain or effort, and in city and urban settings it's plenty really. Probably the only thing I find a little bit unusual is that if you don't have your music on, you can hear that electric motor quite a bit in the cabin. Now, it's not as bad as when I first drove a pre-production prototype of the CX-60 plug-in hybrid a few years ago. Then it was very pronounced and it was really a bit of an issue, but now it's not as bad. It is still there, and it's just something that you don't hear in other plug-in hybrids, so it's kind of unusual that you have that. But I think partly it's to do with the fact that you have this big 8-speed transmission here in the center console as well. Anyway, either way, it's a smooth running car, you know, and it's nice to be able to just commute along in almost near silence, but more importantly with a smoothness that the Mazda has. And that's really where the Mazda kind of differentiates itself from some of the other vehicles in its segment. They've clearly paid a lot of attention to the suspension setup and how the whole package feels, and it does feel very good, and it feels very premium. And that's something that I think some potential car buyers may struggle. If you've not looked at Mazda in recent years, you might not necessarily consider it a premium product, but it really has upped its game. I mean, you know, as I mentioned, with the interior, the detail, the quality of how all this is set up, you know, even this fine stitching across the dashboard, just how solidly this thing feels in terms of its build quality and indeed what it offers as well. You know, there's a really nice balance, for example, in terms of having all the technology there but not having it overpower you. You know, yes, there's a touch screen, and yes, it's a reasonably big size, but it's not this enormous tablet bolted onto the dashboard. And even the digital instrument cluster in front of you, you know, it could display even more space on the amount of real estate that it has, but it doesn't. It gives you just the essential stuff, and the head-up display as well is enough for everything that you need. In fact, it's so good that with the head-up display in terms of the layout, its positioning and its display quality, that you actually really rarely ever look at the digital display that's in front of you. So I guess that's well done to Team Head-Up Display in Mazda. And it gives you all the relevant stuff. You've got your turn-by-turn navigation. It does give you a lane keep guide. You've got your speed limit and your current speed as well. And obviously, if somebody rings you, it'll pop up there as well as on the screen, but you don't need to look at the screen. It's a very nicely laid out, and it's a very well thought through system in terms of how this kind of ecosystem inside all works. And in terms of how it deals with the usual sort of obstacles that you'll face in a city in terms of speed bumps and potholes and all that, it does a very good job of soaking all that up, and also of insulating the cabin from a lot of these things. So there's, you know, you don't feel a lot of the noise coming in. It results in quite a calm driving experience, a calm atmosphere inside, and there's comfort there as well. You know, these seats are really nicely supportive in terms of both your back, your lower back, but also under your legs as well. They extend far enough to give you a little bit of thigh support, which can sometimes be lacking in some cars. And over a longer journey, that's the kind of thing that you do start to pick up on. You're not necessarily going to notice it on your 15-minute test drive from a dealership. And there are other little things that Mazda has done. Even the steering wheel, it's relatively thin rimmed. It doesn't have big chunky spokes. The buttons themselves are very tactile, very easy to feel because they all have this ridge on the leading edge, so it's very easy to flick them up or down as you need them, or press in. So all of those little things really add up. They make it a much nicer driving experience, and there are things that you don't necessarily pick up on immediately, but as you live with a car, these are the things that you begin to appreciate and understand. And it's hard to really, you know, quantify them as one thing, but they do all just gradually add up. Even the fact that you have a dedicated volume knob, there's still a volume knob on this, you know, which is the one thing you're always going to use. Equally, There's physical buttons for all of the climate control. It's very easy. The one thing you're going to adjust is the temperature up or down, and as well as having all the flat buttons across the front of the fascia, the temperature ones protrude out, so it's very easy just to reach over and tap them without even looking at it. So again, Mazda's been very clever in how they've done this, and it does lean into this whole Jinba Itai approach that they have. And it's not just about, that doesn't just apply to MX-5s, it applies to how you interact with the vehicle, how you deal with all these things. And you know, just going back again to the premium aspect for a moment, you know, this has all the sort of stuff that you'd want in it. You've got heated seats, cooled seats, a heated steering wheel. You know, there's a lot of all the sort of luxurious items that you would expect from the likes of your Audi, your BMW, your Mercedes. They're all here. I know there are other people making heated steering wheels, but what I mean is how this is all put together, the quality, the materials, the build quality, that's where Mazda has really upped its game. And it's easy to look at Mazda from a price point and think, oh, they seem a bit expensive for a Japanese brand. And yeah, that's arguably true, but you've got to sit inside this for 5-10 minutes and really have a good look around at how they do it. You know, the quality of the bright work here along the door inserts, the insert themselves, the material quality, it's really good. You know, this is not comparable to a Toyota, for example. This is a step up above it. As with most plug-in hybrids, there are two sides to the Mazda CX-60. In town and in cities, in its electric mode, when the battery is fully charged, it is quiet, smooth. You can do some highway and motorway driving in that EV mode as well, but obviously that is going to deplete the battery that bit faster than it would if you're just driving around a town or a city. So that is just something to keep in mind, that you're not going to get quite as long a range from that battery if you are going to be using higher speed driving on highways and dual carriageways and motorways. But that said, it will flip over to its 2.5 litre petrol engine in this case, and even now cruising along with the cruise control, the adaptive cruise control set at 120 kilometers an hour. The petrol engine is not actually having to work all that hard, thanks in part to that 8-speed automatic transmission. So it's a relatively long top gear, which means that the engine speeds do stay relatively low, and therefore it's not having to work all that hard. Now, over the course of today, we've obviously fully depleted the battery already, at which point the Mazda now reverts into effectively a conventional hybrid mode. So it will still at times recuperate energy back into the battery and will then go into electric mode at lower speeds. It will always try and use whatever energy it can rather than the combustion engine. In terms of how that looks over the course of today, we've already done 135 kilometers. So the battery, we did start off fully charged, that then was fully depleted. We got around 55 kilometers from that before it then switched over and began using the petrol engine in a hybrid status. And the energy consumption on the electrical side was 13.4 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, and thus far we've used 5.5 litres per 100 kilometers of petrol. Now, on the motorway, as we are right now, we are using more fuel than we normally would, so it's sitting around about the moment a real-time indication of between 9 and 9.5 litres per 100 kilometers, but that figure does fluctuate quite a lot depending on the topography that we're on. And I think that's an important thing to state in this review, is that you may look at the top line figures for the CX-60 plug-in hybrid, and indeed for any plug-in hybrid, and you'll see that, you know, the WLTP figure is a combined 1.4 litres per 100 kilometers in this case. And yes, that is true if you do the WLTP cycle, but it's quite a short cycle whereby it's using pretty much all the battery and then a little bit of the engine at the end of that cycle in order to come up with that figure. If you don't fully charge this car and you're doing longer journeys, much longer journeys than that battery range will allow for, you are going to see higher fuel consumption figures, because effectively once that battery is depleted, as we are right now driving on the motorway, we're now propelling the car along using that petrol engine and carrying that hybrid system as well. So that's really the crux of it when it comes down to plug-in hybrids, is that you need to understand, you need to take a look at what you're driving, how you're driving, and therefore use that to then work out whether a plug-in hybrid will be suitable for you. It's important to remember that a lot of average daily journeys are very short. In fact, typically a lot of people are only covering 20 to 30 kilometers per day on their daily commute, and I accept some people are doing longer, but in terms of the average, it's not a long journey. That means if you're charging this vehicle at home, you're leaving with a full battery, you're going to probably do all of your daily driving using only the battery and the electric motor and not the petrol engine, and that's a good thing. But then if you need to do a longer journey, as we're doing today, we're doing quite a long journey, it's probably going to be about 250 kilometers in total, we don't have to stop or think about charging. We can just plow on and use the petrol engine for that extra bit of the journey rather than the hybrid system. So this is the thing, you do have to really take a look at what you're driving, how you're driving, and what you're going to use the vehicle for. And if you are fortunate and in a privileged enough position that you do have very short journeys or every day or a short commute, well then yes, it will absolutely make sense for you to have a plug-in hybrid. But you will only see the benefits of a plug-in hybrid if you are diligent about how you charge it. But do that and you will start to see the rewards. Unlike some of the other plug-in hybrids that are available, Mazda does give you a charge button. So you can press that and it will then divert a little bit more power from the engine back into generating electricity to charge up that battery, because perhaps in between a motorway journey you might not necessarily want to stop and plug in and charge, but you may then want to ensure that you have a certain amount of battery charge for when you reach maybe the next city and there might be, for example, a low emission zone there. So you can do that. Now, a very important caveat is that doing so, using the combustion engine to recharge the battery, is not an efficient way of doing it. But at least Mazda is giving you the option to do it if you do want to do it. There used to be a lot of other plug-in hybrids that had a similar option, but manufacturers gradually took it away because of those reasons. It just isn't an efficient way to charge the battery. But at least Mazda is giving you an option, not just taking things away from you. It's letting you decide if you want to do it. Yes, it's not efficient, but maybe you're in a bind, or maybe for whatever reason you really want to have some battery charge for later on in your journey. Well, at least you have that choice. Now, in terms of changes to this 2025 CX-60, it's pretty much all under the skin. There's no real changes to the powertrain itself, so that remains a combined 327 horsepower and 500 newton meter output in the case of this plug-in hybrid. It uses a 2.5 litre petrol engine up front, and that actually is a decent enough balance. Having that bigger capacity engine means it doesn't have to work quite as hard. Equally, it doesn't really drone on all that much. I'm using the petrol engine at the moment and it's still quite muted. Okay, it does pick up quite quickly. If you do need to add a little bit more power, you do want to up your speed a little bit more, yes, it does start to get a bit more vocal, and it can sound slightly strange if you're really asking everything from it, but it's got a lot of torque on hand, so chances are you're not going to be running those revs all the way out to the red line each time. The most notable changes of the suspension are more or less on the back end, where they've changed some of the arrangement of it. They've added stiffer dampers but softer springs to have a more positive effect on the overall handling without detracting from the comfort of the vehicle. And it is true, it does feel very stable, very planted at the back end. Even over rougher roads, it doesn't ever seem to get unsettled, and that's a positive as well. And while this isn't necessarily a car that you're going to want to fling around the place, it does at least have that inherent stability built into how it handles. And again, that's the sort of maturity that you get from a drive that we typically see in those premium brands. And that's where Mazda again has put in some really good work in terms of, you know, making this feel a lot more refined, very polished, and overall a car that's just very comfortable to drive, very enjoyable to drive. So that's our first drive review of the 2025 Mazda CX-60. Definitely something you should be putting on your shopping list if you're in the market for an upmarket or even premium SUV. If you want to know more about the car, head over to our website. It's CompleteCar.ie. You'll find it linked in the description below. It's a great resource for finding your next new car, as well as keeping up with all the latest car news. And we'd love to know what you think about it. So please do get involved in the comments below and let everybody in our community know what you think about the Mazda CX-60. Thanks for watching.